Welcome back. Let's review. Hopefully, you took a moment to write down the definition of a sight word, and you wrote a list of sight words. So how did you define a sight word? Many people define sight words as words that are exceptions, words that cannot be decoded. These words must be memorized by sight. For the purpose of this training, though, we're going to use a different definition. We are going to define sight words as high-frequency words. High-frequency words are the most common words written in English. Now, why would we define a sight word as a high-frequency word? Well, first of all, what is the most common word in English? Did you get it? It's the word the. The is the most commonly written word in English. So if you can't read the word the or spell the word the, you're going to be stumbling again and again. It's important to master how to read and spell this word. And the first 10 words make up 25% of all written texts. So these 10 words are a quarter of all that we read and write. They're pretty important. And the 25 most frequently used words, they make up a third of all that we read and write. Did you know that in these 25 words, there's only one exception to the rules? And that's the word of. The rest of these words are completely decodable if you know the rules. Now, 100 words make up half of all written texts. For this training, we're going to be using the 100 most frequently used words defined by Oxford English Dictionary to track our progress in learning the phonograms and the spelling rules. And of these words, there are only a handful of phonograms that have exceptions. Now, I'm excited to show you how to decode and how to teach every single one of the words on this list. Why did I choose to track our progress using the Oxford English Dictionary list? This list was created from a research study that uses the Oxford English Corpus. The Oxford English Corpus is a set of texts that use 21st century texts, journals, websites, novels, blogs, newspapers. In this set of texts, there are 2.1 billion words that were being analyzed to generate this high-frequency word list. And these English texts represent English spoken worldwide, so not just in the United States. So these are the texts that we want our students to be able to read as well as to create. So this is a great word list for tracking our progress through this material. Many of you are familiar with the Dolch words. The Dolch words are actually the words used in sounding out the sight words. So when we say sight words in the title here, we mean Dolch words. Where did the Dolch words come from? The Dolch words were compiled by Dr. Edward Dolch. Now, the texts he used were children's literature in the 1930s. And from these sets of children's literature texts, he analyzed that there are 220 high-frequency words and 95 nouns. The Dolch words are traditionally organized pre-K through 3rd grade. However, we organize them in a different way in sounding out the sight words so that you can decode each of these words. Another list that people are familiar with are the Fry words. The Fry words include 1,000 words. They were compiled in the 1950s and updated in the 1980s. The Fry words used texts from grades 3 through 9. So that's this body of literature that they used to compile the Fry words. Now, when you extend out to 1,000 words, there's going to be quite a bit of variation in the texts based on what texts you used. However, there's a high degree of overlap between the high-frequency word lists in the first 100 words, and the first 25 words are virtually identical. This is because the grammatical terms are used to write any sentence in English. And then it begins to matter more and more what the texts were as you extend that word list out, because that becomes the vocabulary in those texts. We will also be looking at the fry words in this training and tracking some of the example words using the fry words. Finally, there are many word lists, one of which is the Oxford word list. And it's interesting because in different school systems around the world, they use different word lists. The Oxford word list is used in Australia, and this research was based on children's own writing in the first 3 grades. So what words do children write? And we'll help them learn to read and to write the words that they are using in their own language. Now, for the purpose of this training, once again, a sight word is a high frequency word. So they're the same. Being able to read these words quickly, to master them, is key to reading and spelling in English. They are not, however, exceptions. Now, if you think that these words are exceptions, you are not alone. I had a teacher once tell me, I spend the first half of the year teaching phonics and the second half of the year unteaching phonics to explain all the exceptions. Why do we feel like this as English speakers? I think it's because most of us know and have been taught what I like to call incomplete phonics. It's not wrong, it's just incomplete. We know that A says as in apple and A is in grapes, B says B is in butterfly, C says K is in carrot, D says D is in drum, SH says sh is in ship. However, the phonics that many of us have been taught leaves a lot of exceptions and a lot of questions that remain unanswered about how words are read and spelled. English is a huge language. There are over 1 million words in the English lexicon. And many phonics programs leave 40 to 60% of those words as exceptions. So if on average you leave half of the words as exceptions, that's 500,000 words to be memorized by rote. Now, it's reasonable to think, well, no one knows all 1 million words. However, an average 5-year-old knows 13,000 words. And it is reasonable to think, I would like to be able to teach this 5-year-old how to read and how to spell every word in her vocabulary. But if my phonics program leaves half of the words as exceptions, that's 6,500 exceptions to be memorized by rote. To put that into perspective, that stack of sight word flashcards would be 5 feet 1 inches tall. You would be drilling sight words constantly if a sight word is an exception or a word that can't be decoded using the commonly taught phonics rules. Human memory is limited to about 2,000 sight sound symbols, and this means that many adults who are functionally illiterate know around 2,000 sight words, yet they can't read the newspaper for meaning. I think we can all agree that our goal in teaching kids to read is to teach them to read and to comprehend, to interact with the texts, and then to be able to express themselves. But if we're teaching sight words, we can tap out the human memory's ability to match sight sound symbols and still not be able to read and comprehend. So in this training, I want to ask you this question. What happens if we begin to teach in a way that eliminates exceptions? What would that do for reading and spelling instruction? And how would that empower students? Let's look at the 5 essential skills of reading again. The foundational skill of reading is phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is the understanding that words are comprised of individual sounds. We will be coming back to this as we look at the pre-lesson. But phonemic awareness, at its basic definition, is that students understand that words, spoken words, are made up of sounds. And students need to become fluent or to master the skill of phonemic awareness. Built upon that skill is the skill of systematic phonics. I define systematic phonics as an accurate written code which translates sounds into a visual image. So, how many sounds are there in English? A phoneme is a sound. How many sounds are in English? Did you know there are 45 sounds in English? That's a surprise to many teachers because there are only 26 letters in the alphabet. English has more sounds than letters. So English is not a language where you have a one-to-one correspondence between letters and sounds. There are some languages that are written in that way, but something more complex is going on with English when it's written, because there are more sounds than letters. In fact, English is a complex code. There are 75 phonograms and 31 spelling rules that logically explain 98% of English words. 98% is a lot more than 50% or 40% or 60%. This is what we'll be exploring in this training, the rules that explain 98% of English words. And I like to call these the critical thinking skills for language learning, because if you are memorizing one word by sight, you have the ability to learn that one word. But if you're learning the phonograms and spelling rules that explain 98% of English words, you can apply that information to read other words. And remember, English is a gigantic language. There are over 1 million words. So these skills help us to read and to write additional words. Now, with sounding out the sight words, we began with just the first sounds of A through Z. This incomplete knowledge that most people actually already have about the language. So let's go ahead and read just the first sounds of A through Z. For those of you who have done other Logic of English training, this is different than when we read all of the sounds of the phonograms. We will be learning the additional sounds as we work our way through sounding out the sight words. For now, we start with the first sound. This says A, B, K, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, A, P, Q. Notice Q always needs a U, so I will include this as a multi-letter phonogram that says Q, S, T, V, W, X, Y, Z. Excellent. So we've read through the first sounds. Hopefully, these are already familiar to you from other programs or from general knowledge about the language. So what I want you to do is I want you to take the first sounds of A through Z, the ones that we just reviewed on the video, and I would like you to apply those to the 100 most frequently used words. How many of these words can you decode by using just these first sounds? You'll find this in your training guide under Activity 2. Go ahead and highlight all the words you can decode with just this knowledge, and then join me in the next video.